Hello and welcome to the Kick in the Creatives podcast, hosted by myself, Sandra Busby, and my fellow creative Tara Roskell, offering you interviews, inspiration, motivation, and a gentle prod in the right direction. And for lots more information, challenges, and other useful tools to help you get creating, you can go to www.kickinthecreatives.com. And of course, this is where you can also find today's show notes. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the podcast. And today I'm chatting with Tracey Fletcher King, artist, printmaker, teacher, and overall just lovely person. But before we start, the February challenges are now in full swing, and it's really lovely to see everyone's work being shared as a result of that. Keep going, you are doing great. And if you want to check out what challenges we have lined up for March, have a look at the website and click on March to find out. Right, on with the show. Enjoy. Okay, so today we have Tracey Fletcher King on the show, and I cannot tell you just how happy that makes me, because I've been a fan of Tracey's, well, and a friend, a really good friend now for a long time. How long have I been stalking you now for? Do you remember?
Well, that's what I was just trying to think. It's got to be, I think it has to be at least 5 or 6 years, at least.
Yeah, I think so.
Wouldn't it?
I think
it would have to be.
Yeah, it has to be that
Could
long,
even
I'm
be
sure.
longer.
I'll have to look back on the blog, on your blog, because that'll tell me roughly when it was, because it was sort of when you were starting to, I think you'd not long gone off of your botanicals and started on clothes pegs and things like that. We'll talk about that, obviously, but obviously I've been lucky enough to have followed your journey now for all of that time, and what a journey it's been for you. But where did it all start then? How did you get into art in the first place?
It's weird, like I've always, a little bit like you in a way, because it's always been art and writing for me.
Yeah.
From the time I was little, it was, writing stories, illustrating them, all the rest of it. And even though my dad painted, I never sort of went down that more classical training road with all of that. And I ended up becoming an art and English teacher.
Yeah.
Purely because I couldn't decide between the two, to tell you the truth. I loved them both so much. And although I ended up only ever teaching art, which I just loved, but so it was always there. Like, it was always around the house. Mum was creative. Dad was creative, obviously. My grandmother, like, everyone was always creative around me. So it was always part of our life. And it seemed quite a natural thing for me to follow because I wasn't sporty. See, my sister was super sporty and I'm horribly uncoordinated. So for me, I had to find something other than sport.
Yeah.
And for me it was art, really, more than anything. So that's it's just always been there, It's always been something that's driven me. And I just love it. I can't imagine not doing it.
No, I agree. I think you can either be sort of one thing or the other. My sister was the same. She was always really sporty and I was hopeless at it. And yet she says she hasn't got a creative...
I'm appalling.
Yeah. And she says, I haven't got a creative bone in my body, she says. But you took a 9-year break, didn't you? Tell me about that.
I did.
What was it like then to pick your brushes up after all that time? Did it come back to you straight away, or did you find yourself having to learn it all again?
It was awful. I mean, it was fantastic. We spent 9 years. I married a touring golf pro. We travelled all over Australia and Asia for years on tour. And then when our daughter was born, Phoebe, we started going to the States, and we would go for 6-7 months of the year. Then we would come back and be back on tour here in Australia for the rest of the time. And although there were times I went to galleries and things, it just didn't lend itself to being creative out on the road. You couldn't carry a lot of stuff. Although now you probably, I could have when I look back, but there wasn't the mental energy. Every Monday you're getting on a plane, going to a new place. It was pretty exhausting and all-encompassing, especially when we were travelling with a toddler. It was, pretty full on. So I had literally done nothing for 9 years except draw like Humphrey Be There, which is like a character here for kids, and those sort of things to keep Phoebe busy when we were on the road. I'd done nothing. So we moved back to Australia sort of permanently, and I went, okay, well, Phoebe started preschool. I'm going to start painting again. This is the one thing I've missed more than anything. And I was so bad, I was embarrassed for myself. I was just like, I remember that first day I sat down and was trying to paint the way I had back in college, and all through when I was teaching, I was still selling my work, and I'd always been very, very into it and active within my own artwork while I was teaching. And that first day I sat down and tried to paint just a simple still life. Like, Matt came home from work and I had a glass of wine and I was crying, and he said, "What?" I said, "I can't paint anymore. It's appalling." And he said, "Show me." I said, "I can't. It's in the bin." And I chucked it. I was just so appalled and embarrassed, and it was just terrible. And it took months. So what I did was I went back and I just got a lead pencil and just started doing like tonal drawings just to try and see again. I felt as though I couldn't even see where the lights and darks were. It was completely alien. It was horrible, horrible time. And so, yeah, it took months of just grind, of just being awful to live with and just hating every minute of it. But I kind of realised I had to go through that. It was 9 years. It wasn't as though I just could pick it up again and go, "Oh, this is all great," It was hard.
Do you think it's a case of, use it or lose it?
I think it is, but I think it was a mental thing for me as well.
Yeah.
I think mentally I had to go, no, of course I can still do this. Did you just get a little ding then? I'm sorry if you did.
No, not my end.
My phone's doing funny things. That's good. No, I think it was a mental thing. I think I expected it to be hard. And I think when those first ones didn't turn out well, I thought, oh, well, it's all gone, And I think I almost had to, I don't know, like let myself off the hook or something. It was like I was so horrified that I'd gone so long, that I'd let my skills drop. But, when they started to come back, they came back really quick. So sometimes I think that was more a mental thing. I think it was more me going, I'm hopeless, rather than it actually being that bad, Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when you were away, when you sort of were away from it for 9 years, then do you think that you knew you were missing it, or do you think that you only realised you were missing it when you actually started again?
No, I missed it all the way through. There were so many times out on tour where I'd go, I wish I was painting, or because look, it sounds like it would be fun, but it's kind of boring on tour because you go to hotels and airports and golf courses, and that's not really that fun, and there's a lot of time. And I used to read enormous numbers of books, and because there's just nothing else to do, you're bored out of your skull half the time. And you see the same people week in, week out, and so I used to sit there and I would often think about paintings, and I would think about paintings I will do one day, and there was a constant sort of, and I did keep like notebooks during that time, and often there were descriptions and things I wanted to paint or try or stuff like that. I found them recently and went back, and it was amazing how often I had sort of mentioned that there was something I wanted to, I saw something and thought, oh, I'd like to paint that one day. So I did miss it, but it just, it was an oddly busy but boring way of life, and totally worth it, because Matthew was totally worth it, and it was amazing too, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was, I regret it or anything. It was a fantastic way to live, but you have these big amounts of time, and it's hard to do things for yourself in that time though.
Yeah. You kind of had to relearn it then, didn't you, really? You sort of just had to relearn all over again. And do you think it's then, with that in mind, do you think that creativity then is something that you're born with, or something that anyone can learn?
I think we're all born with it, but I just think we let it lapse at different times in our life, that's all.
Yeah.
And like when I did my master's in art education, when Phoebes was about 10 probably, I thought I would go back and either teach or go back and lecture. And so I wanted to update those skills. And I looked at creativity theory when I was doing that. And there was one thing that I read in there that really stuck in my mind, and that was that creativity works in a U-shaped curve. So you start really strong, and then around 12, 13, 14, you hit the bottom of the curve. And that's when when you think about it, we're naturally comparing ourselves to everyone. We're all wanting to just fit in. And that's when we're at our lowest creative ebb. And a lot of people stop at that point. But then if you keep going, you go up the other side of the curve. And I realised that I was sort of on my way back up that curve. And that was a really good thing, that even though I'd sort of started to go up it, I'd sort of plateaued again, and I was on my way back up. And then it was like all of a sudden I realised I didn't want to go back and teach. I wanted to keep pursuing what I was doing. And obviously I finished my master's, but it was a really big thing for me. And when I look around and when I talk to people and when I teach people, and the number of people who say, I used to be really, really creative and do all this stuff, and then I just stopped, and, I don't know if I can start again. And it's like, of course you can. It's just everyone seems to follow some sort of curve where they have low points and high points. I just haven't met anybody who it's just been an upward curve, if you know what I mean. No. Everyone seems to go...
Or a Y.
Yeah, that's right. But, no one follows like a bell curve if you're marking someone, the opposite to a U.
Yeah.
No one seems to just keep going up. Everyone has U's and W's and, those sort of curves. And so I think everyone's creative. We just... don't pursue it. It's not a good thing as an adult to do for a lot of people. It's like you're supposed to be serious, and it's play, and it's not serious, and it's not, which is all rubbish, of course, but we listen to that, Yeah,
I mean, I was really creative when I was a child, and, I did exactly the same thing. I just, got halfway down the U and stayed there for a long, long time because I had my kids and whatnot, and it wasn't really until I was in my 30s before I took it up again. And I had that same problem. I had to kind of learn at an older age as well. So that was, and it's tough, isn't it? Emotionally, it's not an easy, I mean, people say, oh, it's really fun, and but it actually, it's like almost like an addiction. It's like a drug, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily do you any good at all some ways emotionally, but at the same time you kind of can't stop. If you love it, you just can't stop doing it, however it makes you feel sometimes. Because sometimes you do, don't you? You feel, like you said, when you started, everything you did was awful, and I was in exactly the same place, and it's so easy to get disheartened and think I'm not gonna do this. But you kind of have to. I've always said you've got to be willing to be bad at something in order to be good at something, and it's getting past that, isn't it?
It is, but also I think that's a really important part of the process. Like, I get really suspicious if someone goes, oh, it's all fun and it's just been a wonderful journey, and I think, well, you haven't pushed yourself,
Yeah.
You've got to push yourself, and it's got to be ugly and messy and difficult, and you've got to care enough to be disappointed. And I think that sometimes people, like I have a friend who goes, oh, it's, she just glides through everything, and I just think, oh my God, how the hell do you do that? Like, but she does. But that's just her. I've never met anyone like her. She just solves the problems and moves on. Like, all of her creative problems just disappear ahead of her, and it's like the most extraordinary thing. It's like her whole creative life is bloody unicorns and rainbows. It's sickening, really. So,
obviously, when you first started, then, because I remember when I first followed your blog, and I think I sort of went right back to the beginning because I was so loving, what I was looking at, and I went right back to the beginning and looked at everything. And you actually started off in almost like a completely different style to what you were doing when I first sort of discovered you and your work. And I would sort of, I don't know, they were kind of like, they were botanicals, weren't they? And really realistic botanicals, really... tight's probably not the right word because they're beautiful. I don't mean tight in a bad way. I mean that they were very realistic. But then there seemed to be a sudden change, and I say sudden because it really was. It seemed that you suddenly just began painting all sorts of household objects, like teacups and
Yep.
clothes pegs. But that seemed to mark quite a significant shift in your style. So they were quite sort of lively and lots of pen and scribbly marks. Was that something you think that happened naturally, or was that quite deliberate?
Well, it was deliberate in the sense that I started showing that on the blog. Like, I had always kept sketchbooks. Like, it was drummed into us back at college, to keep sketchbooks. Like, and all through the years, I had kept sketchbooks on and off. Like, on the road, not so much, but in fact, rarely at all. But I'd always kept. The minute I started back keeping sketchbooks, and I had been looking at botanical art mainly because I wanted to learn watercolors. Like, when I started again, I was doing acrylics and oils, and with a little kid running around, that just doesn't work. And our house was tiny at that stage, so there was no room. There was always stuff getting everywhere, and so I thought, you know what, I'll do watercolors. And the only way for me to learn watercolors, because that's something at art college that was definitely frowned upon as not being it was a medium for hobbyists, not serious artists and all that sort of rubbish. So I was to learn through botanical art. And so that's why I sort of was doing botanicals, because it was a way of learning a skill that I wanted to use. And then, but all the way through, I'd been keeping these sketchbooks that were very much more illustrative in style, I suppose. They were sketchier, lighter, and they were more fun. And one day I'm thinking, like, what am I doing? Like, this is what I actually like doing. I was part of the Botanic Art Society. I was terrible at it. I hated the rules. I was on the board, and they gave me paperwork to do, which just made my brain bleed. And I just thought, what am I doing? I don't want to do botanical art. This isn't me. There's too many rules. It's not right, sort of thing. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start putting up the stuff that I put in my sketchbooks and in, what people now call journals, but to me they'll always be sketchbooks. What is in my sketchbook, that's what should be on my blog, because that's me. That's
a real
what
you.
I paint. Yeah, well, that's what I paint every day. That's what I'm drawing and painting, and that's how I record my world. So it wasn't so much change in direction in my work. It was more a change in direction of what I put out there. So what I'd always seen as private, and what I'd always seen as sort of not being worth put out in the world, which also goes back to art school, where, everything had to have meaning, and you had to think about all these things, and there had to be a tradition behind it, and that stuff they tell you, which is so wrong. And I thought, no, you know what, bugger it. This is what I like. This is me. This is my life. This is what I'm going to do. So I started putting it out on the blog, and I was happier. And it let me combine then, because in my sketchbooks I would often keep little, anecdotes of stupid things the dog had done or Phoebe had done, and they often inform my drawings. And so the blogs became more about that. It became about being a visual and written diary of what our lives were like. And it was fantastic. I absolutely loved that stage. It was just amazing. So my style didn't change. I just sort of let it be shown, if that makes sense.
I think finding a style seems to be the number one thing that most artists seem to worry about. I mean, personally, I've always felt that style tends to happen naturally over time, and usually when you're not looking for it. Would you agree with that then, or do you think there are ways to find it more quickly?
No, you've got to put in the work.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and you can't change it. That's the other thing, I think, is your style's your style, and it's going to be there. And I think there's still a thread, even though over the years I've done a lot of different things, there's always a thread there that I can't put my finger on. Like, I feel as though if I look at your work, I'm going to know it's your work. Yeah. Whether it's, back when you were doing your teddy bears to your cut glass to your marbles, there's something, there's a tone, or there's a feel to them that's perfectly you, and you can't move that. You can't change it. You can't hide it. So I think style happens naturally, and I think we get too hung up on finding a style instead of, just letting it happen. Like, get out of its way. It's there. Just bloody let it go.
So tell me about your blue and white period then, which I think you're clearly still in. How did that come
Yeah.
about?
Basically, I made a decision a couple of years ago to never censor any ideas that I had and to just go with whatever was catching my interest at the time, because I think we can get really into going, no, that's not a good idea, that's not a good idea, that's not good enough, whatever. And then over the years, I've collected quite a bit of blue and white china because I love that colour palette. And we were doing a huge renovation on the house, and part of which was because I wanted to change the colours in the house and so I could have more blue and white around. And it was absolute mayhem. We had bathrooms being pulled out. It was just a mess. And so I was in the studio and I had my favourite bowls sitting there, and it had lemons and limes in it, and I started sketching it and I went, oh, you know what, I'd really like to do some more sort of close work and more still life and sort of explore those skills a bit more. And I think maybe it was a reaction to the chaos around me, but I just felt the desire to go back to doing something that was a bit more realism based and more tonal.
Do you think then that you kind of went into this more sort of neat style because everything around you was just complete complete mess?
Absolutely.
We were both going through the same sort of thing at the same time, weren't we? Because I was
Yeah.
having renovations and you were having renovations, and I was really feeling your pain. But yeah, it's almost like a way I imagined at the time. I'm wondering whether you just kind of need to have a bit more organisation on your paper because everything else was just absolute madness.
Yes, absolutely. It was completely. And it was my own quiet little corner, because we had, at any one time, we would have 3 or 4 different tradesmen in the house. And so the studio's at the back of the house, and it was all tented. So I had to undo all this tape and get through all the plastic, and then I'd close it up and put the earphones in and just focus and go, there's not a house full of sweaty, disgusting men out there making a mess.
You could have always painted them.
Oh my God.
You've done. Have you ever had an experience with life drawing before? Just to quickly go back.
Oh yes, many. Every Monday morning, would you believe, for 3 years at college was life drawing straight up on a Monday morning, 3 hours of it. So, but no, I certainly see, to me, life more means they're naked too, and I wouldn't have wanted to see any of those men naked. Can you imagine?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. That's the thing as well when you go to life drawing classes, isn't it? It's never the Adonis that you want.
Oh God, no. And you know what? But can I tell you a funny story? When I was in my 3rd year, I was a sculpture major. I don't know why I was a sculpture major. I have a feeling because it was like you could sit out the back and smoke. But basically, we used to have this drawing component we had to do, and we had this pregnant model, and it was quite lovely actually because it was such a different shape. And after 3 years of drawing the same people, she was different and she was fantastic, and we were all doing all this work, and she had the baby 2 months early. And she's come in one day and we've all gone,
Where's
what
it
the
gone?
hell? She's walked in with a baby. And we've gone, no, we're not finished. What are you doing? You were supposed to get really big. And, oh, God, it was just so traumatic at the time. It was like, oh, my God, how dare you have this baby? It was like I don't think anyone actually asked, is the baby, is everything good? You were very early. And no, we went on spring break sort of thing, came back and she'd had the baby. So, yeah. So my whole experience with life drawing has always been traumatic, from hairy 40-year-old men as your model on a Monday morning. Ugh.
I wasn't so keen on life drawing anyway because I'm not really drawn to figures particularly. I think everyone seems to be drawn to one thing or other. Some people love to do landscape, some people like to draw figures. I mean, I went to life drawing classes And there was one lady, she came in and I always think it very much depends on where you are in the room. It's pot luck as to what you get, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, and this lady came in and she'd sort of brought a great big mirror with her and sort of sat on it. It was strange because I can't even describe to you. It was quite painful because where I was sitting, I thought really what I'm seeing is I know that as artists I know that we're supposed to see everything as shapes and forms and all that, but sometimes you just can't. You just think, okay, I'm kind of in this sort of area, and I'm thinking, I don't want to look. I just don't want to. Especially twice.
Oh God. I know. It's just some of them are just so. It's just It can be a whole thing.
Yeah.
It can be a whole thing, and you should never do it hungover. That is my other thing.
Oh,
never
no.
ever go to a live class hungover. And Sunday night used to be a bit of a night for us going out, and there was way too many hungover Monday morning sessions, and oh God. And it's a thing. I avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
And you know,
it is though. I think everybody sort of loves doing their particular genres, and it's great because I think it makes it easier to choose things to paint, doesn't it, when you've got a specific thing you love to do. But have you ever experienced artist block, and if you did, how did you overcome it?
You know what, I never really have, but I sometimes think, and I could be wrong, we confuse artist block with losing your mojo, and I think that they're very interconnected. And because everyone goes through times of doubt, and like you and I, we've often written to each other saying like, I feel like I'm not painting well, I can't paint. We all have those doubts and sort of feel like you're losing your mojo. But sometimes I think artist block is an extension of that, where you just take it that step further. Like I had never gone, there's nothing to paint, but there's times I've gone, I don't feel like painting. And I sort of see them as the same sort of thing. Like just losing your mojo is very different, but it's the same.
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes a lot of sense. It does in my head.
I know exactly what you're trying to say. I do. I find when, I don't know if it's connected, but when I've had a bad day in the studio, it'll sort of trigger that loss of mojo, and it's really all about the fact that it's just crushed my confidence, and so I sort of think that I can't do it, so I don't. I almost procrastinate and avoid doing it because I might fail again. Do you know what I mean? And
I do. I think sometimes our lack of mojo creates a block.
It does.
And it's not actually that we're blocked, it's just that we're having that crisis of confidence, and to get around that, I think you just got to show up.
Yeah. I think with paintings as well, they go through this sort of phase, don't they? I mean, I call it the skanky teenage stage, and I feel sometimes that I've got to that point and I can't bear looking at it any longer. So I'll leave this painting and I'll just leave it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll go back to it eventually when I've kind of got my mojo back and realise that actually it's fine, it's going to be fine. What am I, I've been staring at it too long. So how do you, do your paintings ever go through that, and how do you see past it then and keep going?
I actually work a bit differently. I found when I worked on one thing at a time, I got too precious. And that would become a problem because I do get a little bit obsessive. So I found that, and also that doesn't work very well with the weather here. In winter you can do that. In summer you can't because the paper stays damp because of the humidity.
Yeah.
So to work on one thing would just take you forever. So I will happily have, at the moment, I would have probably 20 things on the go, which sounds extreme, but when you think about you putting a layer down, putting it down to dry, picking up another one, I have no problem with having a million things unfinished. And I know that would drive people insane, but that way I sort of forget if I'm not working well on one thing, rather than getting bent out of shape, I just pick up something else and I'll work on that. And if that's not working, I'll put it aside and pick up something else. And so that way I never get blocked because there's always a million things to work on. And I find it's a really productive way to work. And it means that it sort of suits my mood too. Like sometimes I feel like doing one thing, sometimes I feel like doing another. And so it removes all of my excuses. Like, I used to be very much, the wind has to be coming out of the east. My cup of tea has to be exactly this thing. My left earlobe has to be itching. And then I can paint,
The planets have got to
crazy.
align. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I had to get rid of that. And the only way I could do that was to remove all the excuses. So I just have a million things on the go. And that way I can just pick up something and do it. And that works for me,
So have you ever sort of had a piece of work that you love so much you just can't get rid of, a favourite piece that you've created?
Yeah, look, I do, but I usually think my favourite is one or two that I'm working on at the time. Like I'm awful because then I just go, oh yeah, no, you're done. I'm always more excited about the work to come. Yeah. Sometimes there's one or two that I'll sort of keep, but not really. Like I'm usually more excited about what's to come.
But there's one, isn't there, that you didn't you use it as the header banner for your blog? I'm sure. Isn't that one you said you'd never get rid of?
Yeah, my
tea. Yeah.
Yeah, and that does sit in my studio. But yeah, I suppose there's that one and probably the lemons and limes in the bowl. That I wouldn't like. I've had a lot of people ask to buy that and I haven't sold it. So you're probably right. Those two are probably the two that I've held on to. There's a couple. There's also actually a painting that sits in our hallway, in our stairwell to go upstairs that I love. So yeah, there is probably a few. And very different.
I'm lucky because I've actually got a few of yours dotted around my house too.
Yeah, well, I also have some around mine of yours, which is very nice. But I think that's one of the nice things too about being an artist is like you get to have your friends' art around you.
Yeah.
I think that is just, I love that. I like walking around the house going, now, my friend Sandra did that. And, and that's, it just means you're surrounding yourself with sort of this great creative vibe all the time,
Well, the ones I've got of yours are the perfume bottles. You did a series of perfume bottles and they were absolutely stunning and I just fell in love with those straight away. I mean, I fall in love with all of your work, but they in particular, I just love them. So yeah, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, look, I've actually just revisited some of those for an event in Saudi. So I just did a few new ones and they've gone off over there for this event. But, I still come back and visit things. Like I don't ever sort of go, I'm never doing those again. I have no problem. Like and some of this I know, right, is my art college brain talking where they say you've got to keep moving forward and develop your images and develop your work. But if I feel like going back and painting, a perfume bottle again, I do it. And I just don't really care about any of that. I just do whatever I feel like painting. At the moment it's all swimsuits. It's just...
I know. I was looking at them yesterday on Instagram and they're amazing. And blue and white again, which is great.
Yeah,
continuing the theme.
Well, I've got a big commission coming up. I'm actually excited about because normally commissions I'm not excited about. I get very, very stressed, but this one I'm really excited about. So these are all in preparation for doing 3 huge ones, which is very exciting. So, but I could be on this for months, I don't know. But I'm also doing all this other work for a show in April, so I'm sort of going between things.
Yeah.
Which is good.
And commissions, I think, are difficult, aren't they? Because I only take them on personally if it's something I already paint. But sometimes, for instance, I wouldn't sort of agree to paint a landscape because it's just not the subject I paint. But I think commissions are quite stressful, aren't they? Is that, yeah.
I think they're horribly stressful.
Yeah.
But this is different. This is the first time I've actually gone, I haven't said yes and then gone, oh, I've done the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. That immediate sinking in your stomach of why did I just say yes? This time I'm sort of going, oh, this is going to be great. This will be fun. So I'm actually excited about this one. So maybe it's more in the past I've just always done the wrong ones or
Yeah.
something.
Oh, well, you've
I don't
never
know.
failed at one of those. I can tell you, with everything I've seen of yours has always been
Uh,
amazing. But changing direction a
oh,
little bit now.
yep,
We are planning actually an episode in the future on how art can be a form of therapy at some point soon.
yep.
And I don't think there can be anyone better to share an opinion on that than you. Your life took quite a significant turn a few years ago when you were diagnosed with breast cancer. And I know that
Yep.
you kept an art journal during that time, which you kept to yourself. But can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, did you find it to be like a form of therapy somehow? How did it actually help you?
Look, it was a form of therapy. I don't know how much it helped in some ways. At the time, like I did, I basically kept a sketchbook through the entire way through treatment the first time round, and it was a year of treatment, and I would draw and write every day. And I don't know when I sort of finished and came through that, and I looked back on it, I actually didn't know that it did help me a lot, to tell you this. I actually think on one hand it did, because I had somewhere that was just for me, but it was often very dark, and it was pretty bleak, and sometimes I think that it kept me in a more negative place than I needed to be. But the act of doing it was good.
Yeah.
It made me do something every day, which was good. But yeah, and so yes, it was therapy, and it was probably good because I got all that crap out. But at the end of it, I did throw it away. I had two full sketchbooks, and I threw them away.
Do you regret that at all, or are you happy
So
that you did that?
no, not at all. I think it was actually a really good thing to do, because like, it represented where I was in the moment, but not where I was coming out of it. And it just, you don't need to look back on that. It's, I lived it.
Yeah.
I lived it once. I wrote it all down. I didn't need to go back and look at it. So I actually think it was a really good thing to throw it away. And sometimes I think that we should be doing that too. Like, it's okay to go, I'm done with this now, let's move on. And, this time, because I was re-diagnosed this year, I sort of thought, well, will I do that again? Will I keep a sketchbook? And I went, you know what? No, I'm not going to,
Yeah.
because I don't feel I need to. And I just thought, no, like, that was good then. It helped me then, but now it wouldn't help me. So at the time it was good, but this time around, no, I've had no desire to do that. So, I think that it was probably very good therapy at the time, but I also think it was very good therapy to then throw it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, almost like leaving it behind.
And yeah, that's right. And, I think maybe that process meant that it has been not necessary this time,
Yeah,
if that,
yeah.
sort of, it's, yeah. So that's how I've dealt with it. But I know a lot of people find it incredibly helpful.
Going back though to when you were very first
Yeah.
diagnosed, I mean, I'm pretty
Yep.
sure that most people would have just put down their brushes until the treatment was over. But I was just
Yeah.
amazed at the time, because it seemed that despite everything you were going through, you became more prolific than ever. I don't know how you did it, but why do you think that happened? Was it a conscious decision to just do more?
I don't know that I was more prolific. I think I think people expected me to not be. In fact, I blogged less than I had been blogging. But I only missed a couple of weeks in that year. There was only a few weeks where I didn't blog, but that was my thing. It was like I was going to make sure I got up and did something that I could blog each week, and that was sort of my deal with myself, was to get up and just bloody do something, because otherwise you can lie around in bed. You feel just so rubbish through chemo, and then there was 2 surgeries and chemo and then radiation, and like you feel rubbish and you need something to sort of to normalize things. And for me, that was the blog. So it was sort of like I made that decision. It was like, no, I'm going to get up. I'm going to just still do this. I'm going to look for something that's fun and interesting and good that happened this week that I can draw and write about. And and that's what I did. And, maybe it was because I had what I call my black journals, which, were full of all the bad stuff, And then I had the blog, which was in a way my public face. But I think that was more value to me than those journals, because I've always looked at the blog as just another form of a journal.
Although you're not sort of using it anymore. Is there a reason for that?
No. Well, time. It comes down to time. I did get very busy after treatment that first time, and I took on a lot of work as an illustrator and did a lot like that. And then people sort of stopped blogging a bit. And I just got so busy. And I'm one of these people, I feel really bad. If people visit my blog, I need to visit theirs.
Yeah.
And, and it becomes a thing. And when especially now, because I do have limited time still at the moment, although we're coming to the end of treatment, sort of everything's settling this time, I just don't have time for that. I have limited time that I can paint, and I've got the show coming up, and look, I love Instagram. I absolutely love it.
But you must be an expert at time management now, because obviously going through cancer treatment and trying to fit in, because you got a lot of jobs, didn't you? Like you say, of illustration, and I mean, to try and fit all of that work you were doing in the time, because I know that with treatment you were having several days a week where you were just unable to do much at all, and so in a way your time kind of halved in that way, in the the time you had to create. So trying to fit it all in, how did you manage your time? What did you do to kind of make sure you got that time in? Have you got any tips? Of
course. Of course I've got tips, millions of tips.
Because life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. Oh, and you know what? It gets in the way no matter what. It's not just bloody cancer. Kids get in the way. Husbands get in the way. Everything gets in the way. The first time around, it was a real struggle, but I would make myself get out of bed. This time, it's been a little bit different. This time, because I'd built up a business around it, and it had to keep going because the money I make is money that we rely on, and treatment's expensive, and do you know what I mean? This time I had to actually treat it very differently, and I had to be quite sort of regimented in a way. And I know, like, I would have chemo one day, I would start to feel no good the next day. I'd be out completely for sort of 2 days, and then I would have to say, okay, for this day, I'm doing this. And I had to create a schedule because, it was 6 months of chemo this time, and it was weekly. So I would lose 3 days a week, basically. And so it was a matter of scheduling. I would know that, they could fend for themselves. Matt and Phoebes fended for themselves for those few days. We had some friends who helped with meals and things, but then on the other days I would make sure I had meals in the freezer so that I could work for as long as I could. And I work for a patch of time in the morning, then I have a rest, then I work for another patch in the afternoon, and then nighttime is for orders for Etsy and online and that sort of thing. So I sort of have my times when I can work. And it's just like having like an office job in a way. You have this time, then that time, and you do this there. And so I only fill orders at night. I only do, I only go to the post office twice a week. Everything has to be really regimented now. And I think sometimes as artists we think it should all be very free-flowing and, do it when the mood hits you. But I think that doesn't work. I think you've got to treat it like a job. And there's nothing wrong with having a job that you love, but that's how I do it. That's how I get through. And I just make sure, like at the moment, I have 3 to 4 days a week still, because I still lose time with scans and tests and all this ongoing crap. So I still stick to that same schedule. So Tuesdays through Fridays, I'm just full on work, and I paint so much during that time. It's not funny.
Do you ever find yourself struggling between, obviously you've got your treatment and whatever, but when you're home and you're painting and Matt and Phoebes are around, do you ever struggle with that kind of guilt that you should sort of, because I do, I always find that when I'm painting sometimes at the weekends, which I spend a lot of weekends full on in the studio, and I do sometimes get this sort of guilt, even though Paul would never make me feel that way, but I feel I should really be spending time indoors with him or going out with him, but I need to be here. So it's a battle, isn't it, of where your loyalties lie sometimes.
Well, it is. It's funny though, because and this sounds terrible, I scheduled my chemo so that my bad days would be when they're home over the weekend. So well, no, I know that sounds really awful.
Do they listen to this?
Also, yes, but also, no, don't. It sounds worse than it is. But also, I couldn't be left on my own during those days, so someone had to be here anyway.
Yeah.
So sort of that was that. And now even I plan my scans. Matt's off on a Sunday, Monday, so my scans and things are on a Monday. So, we can have, it's so exciting. Off we go to my, CT scans together. Woohoo, big date day. But I tend to plan those things to fall on those times when they're around anyway, which makes, it does sound awful when I'm saying it to you, but it works for us because someone has to be with you anyway, and the medication I'm on now is all settling, so I'm pretty much now just on scans and weekly blood tests and things. But that's how I've set it up. I've set it up, that on the days when Phoebes is busy with uni and work and Matt is busy at work, that's when I get to work. And I figure, well, yeah, it's worked for us. I don't. I know it sounds a bit awful, but then I don't feel guilty.
No. I think it's everyone's got to have. I don't know. Everyone's got to have something, haven't they? Outside of the house, I think is so important. And I say Paul doesn't make me feel guilty, so that's great. But
no, we always feel guilty ourselves.
I think we do, don't we?
I think that just it comes with the ovaries.
And I think it's a guilt because really we're enjoying it, which is weird, isn't it? If we didn't enjoy it, we wouldn't feel guilty.
I know, and I don't think that Phoebe shouldn't love what she does, or Matt shouldn't love what he does. But I think, shouldn't be doing something that's fun, but they bloody have a good time. So maybe we've got to realign that. Yeah.
So what's been the highlight then of your creative journey so far, apart from talking to me, of course?
Oh, of course, that goes without saying. I don't know. Look, I am really excited about the exhibition coming up, because a solo exhibition is something I've always wanted to do. So, and that's, it's sort of still at that overwhelming stage where I'm going, I don't think I'll get it done, but deep down I know I'll get it all done. So that's great, because I've never had to think about a whole body of work in such a big way, and I'm loving that process. That is really exciting me. So I think that'll be a highlight. But otherwise, I don't know, to me, it's just something you do every day. So I just like that. I like walking into the studio. I think the first day we set up the studio at the back of the house, it used to always be part of the house, and then we have this tiny room out in the back near the pool, and we decided to move the studio out there and make that my studio.
Sounds awful.
And I could go in there.
Sounds horrible.
Oh, I know. Just how I know. I sit there and the pool's there and the bamboo's there, and I know it's just shocking. But I know when I walked in there that first day and went, oh my God, this is awesome. Like my own little space where I can leave things out and I can just close the door and walk away and walk back in, and nothing's been moved and no one has stolen my scissors, or no one's using my really expensive pen to write a bloody grocery list, or do you know what I mean? Everything was protected in there until we got a stupid cat, and now it's bloody fair game again. But that was actually a highlight for me, because it was a space for me. It meant I was taking it more seriously. I was saying it's okay to have a space. So that was a big highlight. There has been other highlights. So, like, I did packaging for a tea company in the US, and it's so exciting when I see that out in the world. So, you know, there's things like that have been great fun as well.
Are you still doing that?
The big things
Are you still doing the
I'm not actually. That's one thing. And, you know, look, that is the bonus of cancer, is that it makes you reassess. And I went, you know what, I do have a limited time now, so I'm just going to do things that I really, really want to do, and I don't want to do any more illustration. So I've actually let all of that go. And it was only in December I finished up with my last clients, but it feels really good. It feels really, really good. It's a little bit scary, because then, you know, that money isn't coming in, but I've found since then I've been selling more paintings anyway, so I think it must have been the right thing to do, because it's worked out.
And going back to what you were saying about studio, having your own studio at home, I have to say that I felt the same, that my life sort of changed when Paul built my studio, and he basically...
And yours looks awesome.
Oh, well,
yours is
it's
huge.
Just you know, it's the garage, but it's been converted. He kindly moved all his stuff, you know, man stuff, the ugly metal objects. You have no idea what they are, and the paint pots and and the lawnmower and everything. And he kind of moved it down to another little sort of shed, and he converted the garage for me, which is great. And it makes such a difference, doesn't it, when you have a place that you can call your own. But even if, you know, somebody isn't lucky enough to have that sort of an area they can call themselves, you know, their own, I think it's important, isn't it, that everyone has a little, even if it's just the corner of a room, that they can sort of say, right, this is, nobody touch anything from this point. Do you know what I mean? It makes I think it's so important for every artist out there that they just have a little spot in the, even if it's in the house, that is just their little, do you know what I mean?
I do, even if it's just an IKEA trolley, you know, that you can move, but especially as grown-ups, and this is one of my big problems with being a grown-up, is it appears everything that you own, everyone else can touch, you know?
Oh,
and especially as a mum, it's like whatever's yours is everyone else's. And so to have something that's a no-go zone, I think is almost like, it's like reasserting yourself as a person and going, I'm not just a mother, wife, part of a family here. I'm my own person. This is my stuff. Get away from it, you know? And it's that, like, okay, the lines are drawn. You can all bugger off now. This is my stuff. Don't touch my stuff. And I think that's the act of having a studio or an area, is it's like reclaiming that bit of yourself that's not attached to everyone else around you.
And also I think as well, when things are perhaps a little bit darker outside, you know, as in life, obviously we all go through dark sort of periods, and as you know, and I think having that kind of space is a good place to leave it behind, isn't it? Out of your mind while you're focusing on what you love to do. It's kind of like a haven, isn't it, almost?
I think it can be. I mean, for me, it's about normality. Yeah. You know, things have to be normalised, and you know, otherwise I couldn't cope. I couldn't get out of bed. And this is normal for me. It's normal for me to get up, get dressed, go to the studio, go to work. And, you know, if you had said to me 10 years ago that I would be happily saying I'm going to work now, and walk into a studio and be working, like, one, I would have thought you were mad, because who would be lucky enough to have a studio and do that for work? But also I would have gone, oh, no, you shouldn't approach it like that. You should approach it when the muse hits and all that sort of rubbish. But you know what? It's just a job that I really, really love. And it's so nice to have that every day that you go and you do it. And, you know, we're on holidays now, and I've still brought work with me. And, I'll carve lino blocks, partly because the show's coming up and I'm really behind. And I'll do some painting up here, and I'm planning for the exhibition. And it's like, well, that's okay, even though I'm on holidays, because I love what I'm doing. So what's wrong with that? It's it would feel weird for me to not do that. And it's not like it's intruding on our holiday or anything.
Not like me.
Matt's out there swimming.
I mean, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time out of your holiday to talk to me. It's fantastic. And I want to say, I've got a pool outside at the moment, but mine's in the form of a massive muddy puddle rather than a beautiful turquoise swimming pool that you sent me a photograph of. So
I had to taunt you. You should be. You're lucky I haven't got the windows open so you can hear the surf right outside my window.
I'll be turning up one day.
You will.
But
you will.
Meanwhile, where can our listeners then find out a bit more about you? I mean, there is your blog, and I know that despite the fact that you don't write it anymore, I would highly suggest to anybody who hasn't yet sort of discovered you, that they read it from start to finish, because there are times when that blog had me absolutely in stitches. I mean, crying with laughter. Some of the things you spoke about that nobody else would ever dream of speaking about, and it was just hilarious. But it was just so funny, and I think it's just it's your personality. Whereas Instagram and things like that, they're brilliant, but I suppose you don't, you can't share your personality so much on Instagram because it's just such a small window of text, isn't it?
It is.
But I would highly suggest that people go and have a look at that.
Yeah, look, I've got a website which is just traceyfletcherking.com, and of course Etsy and Instagram. I'm Tracey Fletcher King everywhere. I think Facebook is Tracey Fletcher King Artist. And you know what? But I will go back to the blog. It does. It's the one thing that I miss, I must say. And I often say part of being driven to decide to let go of all the illustration stuff was to free up time for things like the blog, and just sort of, but this time I'm just going to write it, and if people visit, they visit. If they don't, they don't, but just for me, I do miss that. But no, that's where people can find me mainly, though. Every day is Instagram. Instagram, Facebook, all the normal places, Etsy, website. YouTube, there's videos on YouTube.
Yeah, you've done some great tutorial videos as well. It's well worth checking out. Well, thank you, Tracey, so much for and you can go back to your pool and your surf and
yes.
And I'll just go back to work.
I know. Yes, I know. Glass of wine, watching the sunset.
And it's really strange the time's different, because it's sort of 8:20 here, and it's, what time is it there? 7:20?
Must be 6:20 at night. It's still light. It's beautiful. I know. One day we will walk down this beach together. It'll blow your mind.
Thanks so much again, Tracey, and we will hopefully talk again soon.
We will.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sandra. Bye.
Oh, that was such a treat chatting with Tracey. What a great girl she is. We'll be having Tracey back on the show later on in the year. Tara is back with us for the next episode, which is asking the question, do you have to go to art school to be an artist? So listen out for that one. We'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, perhaps you'd like to share it and leave a review for us on iTunes. Back soon.